Hello guys, welcome to my channel. In this video I am going to show demo about creating custom picker control in .NET MAUI application. So here I just created a new project called custom picker control. Now let me add here new folder custom controls. So in that I am just going to design drop down button. So let me add here content view called drop down button. Okay, and here I'm just going to set this drop down button as a frame, and also in code behind I'm just going to inherit from frame. Now here I'm just going to design layout for drop down button. Right now I'm just setting here dummy value. Later on we will fetch this data from bindable property. Okay, now this drop down button I can access on any page. So let me just add here namespace. Okay, so here on main page I'm just going to now display this drop down button from the custom controls folder. Now let me run the application. So we can see now this static layout that I have designed on a main page. Okay, so here now it's displaying as a select item. Now let me just set here border color and okay, so now it's looking good. Now here I'm just going to add now frame gesture recognizer, and on the tap of this frame I'm just going to display some data in pop-up. So for that, now let me add one plugin. So just right click on your project, click on manage NuGet packages, and search for plugin.maui.popup and install that plugin in your project. Okay, now here another custom control I'm just going to add as a .NET MAUI content page, and that name will be, I'm just going to add as a picker control view. Okay, now this picker control view is going to use instead of content page I'm just going to use base pop-up page, so that I'm just going to fetch from plugin.maui.popup. So let me add that namespace. So from this Maui pop-up plugin, I'm just going to use base pop-up page. Okay, now here on the click of this tap gesture of drop down button, now I can just display page like this, pop-up action dot display pop-up. In that I just need to specify picker control view, and that just going to display containing pop-up. Okay, now let me run the application and let's see. So on the click of drop down button, it's just going to display this picker contain view. Okay, so here on the click of now pop-up, on the click of drop down, it's just displaying containing pop-up page. Okay, now I'm just going to add here collection view in this picker control view. So whatever the data we going to bind to this drop down button, that I'm just going to display here in this picker contain view. Okay, now let me replace this vertical stack layout with collection view. Okay, now here in a code behind of picker control view, I'm just going to access now item source, then the item template, and the picker control height. So this I'm just going to set here in a collection view. So collection view dot item source is equal to whatever the item source I will pass from this drop down button from here, that I'm going to access here in a picker control view. Same way I'm just going to set item template and the height request of this collection view. Okay, now let me create here bindable property in dropdown button.xaml.cs, because I need to pass here now item source, item template, and the height request. So let me create here properties for that. Okay, so here property name I'm just going to set as a item source, then that return type will be the type of enumerable, then declaring type will be the type of our current control class, so that going to be drop down button. Okay, now let me create getter and setter property for this item source. Okay, now this item source property I am going to pass here in a picker control view. Now let me create another property, item template, that I am going to pass here. And this speaker height request also I am going to pass. Okay, so now this tree property I have created in drop down button I can access here in a main page. So I can set now item source, then item template, and the picker height request. Okay, so here in the main page code behind I'm just going to pass some dummy data in item source property. So let me just create one folder called models, and in that I'm just going to create one class Okay, so here I'm just going to use only one property right now, that title, and let me add another property that I will add some dummy record later on. Okay, so here now in a main page Okay, so here in a drop down control item source I am just setting whatever the items I have added here, and for item template either you can set item template. If you design any item template, then you can set from here also, or you can directly specify item template here in UI. So let me just add in UI okay, so this title property I'm just going to access for displaying purpose. Now let me run the application. Okay, now here on the click of drop down button it's just going to display data in pop-up. Okay, so it's displaying like this. Let me just set picker height request, and let me rerun the application. I forgot to set here picker height request, so due to that by default it take as a 0, so it's not displaying data. So later on I am just going to set here some default picker control height request. So when the user not pass any height request, it's just going to set default height request. Okay, so now it's displaying all item here in picker. Now let me just set vertical option of this particular picker control view to and expand, so it's just going to display here at the end of screen. And also now you can just format the layout from this data template, so you can add like padding and font size, so whatever the changes you do, that just going to reflect here in this UI. Okay, now I'm just going to select item from this picker control view, and going to bind here in a drop down button label. So for that, let me add here selection change event and the selection mode. Okay, so here whatever the item is selected, that I'm just going to get from this collection view current selection dot first and default, and that I'm just going to pass here in a drop down button. So when I call this pop-up action dot display pop-up, is going to wait, like if any value is going to return from this pop-up control, that I can access here. So now I just need to do is pop-up action dot close pop-up, and in that whatever the item I selected, that I'm just going to pass. So now I can access item here. And another thing I need to do is what type of value this display pop-up is returning. So right now, like we don't know which type of value, because we are accessing as a enumerable item source, so we don't know. So right now I'm just returning as an object format, so that value we will get here. Now let me run the application and let's see it's returning value on the selection of item or not. Okay, so here on the selection of any item, so it's a returning response in our object format title and value. Okay, now another thing, like we don't know from this item source which item we need to display, like which field value we need to display here in a selection. So for that, let me create another property in a drop down button called display member. So in that, whatever the property name I passed, that I'm just going to fetch that value and going to display here in drop down button label. Okay, so here in the main page, like we have title and value property, so I want to display title here in a drop down. So now I can specify display member as a title. So from the item source, I want to display title in a selected item here in a drop down button. Okay, now to get value using display member, for that I need to use a reflection. So let me add that code. Okay, so from this object I'm just going to get property that will be the display member, and that value I want to fetch, and if any value is not available, then it's just going to return null. Okay, now let me run the application. Okay, so now whatever the value I select, that just going to display here in picker control. Okay, now let me add another condition, like if display member name is not empty, then only I'm just going to fetch value from this response using display member. And also let me set here height request of picker control view. By default I'm setting as a 200. Okay, now in some of cases, like when I click here in a drop down button, we need to wait till some data fetch from API. So for that, let me just create some property, like this pop-up is not going to display until some data is loaded from the API. After that, this pop-up is going to display. Okay, so for that I am just going to create bindable property for first I'm just going to create is loading property to show loader like some of data is loading from API. So this property is going to be type of boolean. Okay, now this I am just going to bind here. So let me add here activity indicator. Okay, so from the current page, like drop down button class reference, I'm just going to fetch is loading property here. So based on that, it's just going to display loader here. Now another property I'm just going to create is open picker command. Like when I click on picker control, that time first it will set this is loading property to true until the data fetch from API, and after that it is going to set this is loading property to false. So let me create now command. Okay, so this open picker command is the type of I command. Okay, now let me create event also, like if some of user not using view model concept, that time they can use event to display data. Okay, now let me add another condition, like if display member name is not empty, then only I'm just going to fetch value from this response using display member. And also let me set here height request of picker control view. By default I'm setting as a 200. Okay, now in some of cases, like when I click here in a drop down button, we need to wait till some data fetch from API. So for that, let me just create some property, like this pop-up is not going to display until some data is loaded from the API. After that, this pop-up is going to display. Okay, so for that I am just going to create bindable property for like first I'm just going to create is loading property to show loader like some of data is loading from API. So this property is going to be type of boolean. Okay, now this I am just going to bind here. So let me add here activity indicator. Okay, so from the current page like drop down button class reference, I'm just going to fetch is loading property here. So based on that, it's just going to display loader here. Now another property I'm just going to create is open picker command. Like when I click on picker control, that time first it will set this is loading property to true until the data fetch from API, and after that it is going to set this is loading property to false. So let me create now command. Okay, so this command is going to be type of I command. Okay, now also I'm just going to create one event. Okay, so if the user using view model, then they can use this open picker command, and if they are not using view model concept, then they can use directly open picker event. So now here in a drop down button, wherever you use this drop down button, then you can specify either open picker command or open picker event. So let me just use open picker event, and also here now you can set is loading property. So here in a drop down open picker event, I can set drop down control is loading. Okay, let me see this property. Okay, so I just set is loading property to true, and once the data fetch from API, then I will set this is loading property to false. So for temporary I am just going to set something like this. It's just gonna be delayed for 1 second, and then it's just going to set is loading to false. Now let me run the application. So now we will see this loader running on a drop down button. Okay, sorry, here I forgot to set here in a drop down tab gesture recognizer. First I need to bind this command. So on the click of drop down button, I need to invoke this open picker command and that open picker event. So let me just set if open picker command is available, then I'm just going to execute that. Otherwise, if any event is registered, then that event I'm just going to invoke. Okay, so now it's just going to display loader. Okay, so here on the click of this drop down button, it's just displaying this activity indicator, because we set here is loading to true, and it's just gonna wait for 1 second. So here you can call API, and once the API response is available, that then you can just display the picker control. So for that displaying picker control view, I need to create another bindable property, like is the display picker control. So let me just copy this command property, and I'm just going to create another property called is display picker control. Okay, so that's going to be type of boolean. So when it is true, that time I just display picker control view. So let me just implement property changed event. So here I'm just going to create one method is display picker control property changed. So here I will check, like if the new value is not null, then I will just check if this property is display picker control is true, that time I just going to display now this picker control view. So now here I cannot access directly this item source, item template, picker height request, and display member all properties. So for that I need to use this. So from the bindable object I converted that to drop down button. Now I can access property that available, like controls.item source, then controls.item template. Okay, so when this is display picker control property become true, that time it's just going to open the pop-up control, and in that it just display list of item. After that again I will set this is display picker control to false, to like when again user click on that drop down button, that time we need to display again this picker control view. Now let me run the application. So now on the click of drop down button, it's just going to wait for 1 second, and after that, okay, so here now I need to inform to drop down control, like is display picker control to true. So when I set this as a true, then it's just going to display the pop-up. Okay, so now it's just waiting for response from API, and after that it is just displaying pop-up. So like that you can do. here you can uh, on main page, here you can call any API, and once the response from API is available, then you can set that to here in a drop down control item source. Right now I just set already, I just showing that, so you can add that. Let me adjust this code here. So just assume this is calling API, and after that it's just setting that data into item source, and it's just setting is display picker control to true. Okay, so now it's just gonna display, and here whatever the item you select, it's just going to uh, display in this drop down button. Now here, like we need to access like whatever the item is selected in this drop down. So for that I need to create another property called selected item. So whatever the item is selected, that I'm just going to bind in one bindable property. So let me create that property here. I'm just going to set property name as a current item property. So whatever the item is selected, that just going to bind here. And that will be the type of object, as we don't know which type of data is bind to collection view. So for that purpose I'm just setting as an object. And here I'm just setting binding mode to two ways. So either user can set current item directly from directly from the view model, or whenever the user select any item from here, so that time also it's just going to reflect here. So for that purpose I'm here just a default binding mode I set as a two-way. Now here on property change, I'm just going to create current item property change method. Okay, so I will check like if the new value is not null, then whatever the code I have added here on this picker is display picker control property change, that code I am just going to now I just going to remove from here, and that I am just going to set here. And here on the drop down close I just set now current item is equal to whatever the response we select from this pop-up control. Okay, so now I can access this current item property. Okay, now let me create another property for placeholder, like if you want to display any text here as a placeholder. Right now I'm just displaying this static text select item. So for that I'm just going to create another property for placeholder. Okay, so this property is going to be type of string. Okay, now here I will check like if the current item is null. So if is there any item is available, then we display current item tags here in this label. If there is no tags available, then we just going to display whatever the tags that we pass here in a placeholder property. So that I'm just going to display here. Okay, so now I can access this current item property as well as a placeholder property here in this drop down control that I added here in main page. So now I can set placeholder like this. Okay, so when I run the application, that time now it going to display select item in this format on this drop down button. Okay, so now it's displaying as a select item here in drop down, and when I select any item, that just going to now replace with this current this drop down label. Now let me just set, if user set like when application open, that page open, that time user want to set some default item, then user can set something like that, drop down dot current item is equal to, I'm just going to set last or default from the from this list. So when the application launch, that time in a drop down control, it's just going to display this title 7 as a drop down text. Okay, sorry, I need to set this here on main page initialization, because this only invoke when I click on here drop down open picker event. So when I select, then if you see this title 7 is set, so I need to set here some item like this directly. So now when I run the application, that time it's just going to display title 1 here in drop down button. Okay, so now it's displaying title 1 here as a default item. Okay, now let me show you like this all, like I binded this item source and everything I did using code behind. Now let me achieve same functionality using view model. So for that, I'm just going to add one plugin first. This community toolkit.mvvm, so easily I can create a bindable property I notify property I can easily define. Okay, so I am just going to create main page view model here. Okay, so here on main page on open picker event I'm just binding this all data. So let me now add same thing here in view model. So for that I'm just going to create observable collection of title value. Okay, and this I'm just going to set here in item source. Okay, and same way here I have defined open picker event. Same way I can define here open picker command. So let me just create one command here. Okay, so this command is going to execute when I click here on this drop down. So let me just remove this open picker event as we not needed this. Okay, so here now I'm just going to add some items. Title and value I'm just going to add here in this item source. Okay, and here let me add another observable property. So here I will set is loading to true and wait till API response is returned. So if you call any API here, then just wait till response came, then I add that data in observable collection, and after that again set this is loading property to false. Now to display picker we created one property here in a drop down button is display picker control like that. So for that let me create another observable property is display picker, so that once the data response came from API, then I will set is display picker to true. Okay, now let me bind this all here. Is loading is equal to binding is loading. So this property is going to now bind from main page view model. Same way is display picker control is equal to this is display picker property. Okay, now let me run the application. Okay, so here on the click of this it just displaying data, and on the second time it's not displaying pop-up, that due to this is display picker control property is not become false. So let me just see here. Okay, so this default binding mode I set as a one way, so let me just set as a two way, because once the response once the pop-up is closed, we are setting this is display picker to false, but is not reflecting here on main page view model. So that reason I set as a two way. Now also let me just add here delay so we can see loader. Okay, so now you see this activity indicator showing. After that it's just displaying items. Okay, now to get whatever the value is selected, so for that you can access using current item property that we define here in drop down button. So we have current item property, so using that I can access whatever the value is selected. So let me just create observable property, type of title value, and that's just going to be current item. So you can set default value also here. So let me just set default value is going to be okay. So same this current item, now I can bind here and whatever the item is selected, if you want to display in label, then you can also display like this, current item dot title. So it's just going to display whatever the value selected from this drop down. Okay, so here now it's displaying, if you see here in label, it's displaying default text that we set in current item. Now if I select any value from this speaker, then it's just going to display here too. Okay, now let me just quickly overview of this all the property. So this item source property we use to bind data here in picker control. So that I am using a plugin.maui.popup plugin to display that data, and here item template. So whatever the change I do, like if I set here horizontal stack layout and in that I want to display some image, so you can just design any layout as you want. So that's just going to reflect here in this UI. Okay, so that item template property we use for that purpose, and this display member, like which value you want to, like whatever the value I select from this, that here in a drop down button, if you want to display some value here, some different value here on this pop-up, and other value you want to display here, and this drop down button, there you can just specify display member. So if I set here as a value, and when I select any item, so this just going to display value from current object. And this is display picker control is just used to, like when the item source is set, after that when you set this property to true, that time it's just going to open this picker control. And this current item property, so if you want to bind some default value to this drop down button, then using this property you can bind it. And also if you want to fetch which item is selected in this drop down button, then using this current item property you can fetch that value. Okay, so here I am selecting title, and here it displaying value. So whatever the value from the class you want to bind, whatever the property, that just you need to define here in display member. Okay, so I hope you like this video. That's all for today. Thank you so much for watching it.